Good morning. My name is Dr. Helena Swinkles, and I am I'm a public health physician, so one of the relatively few people here who's coming at this from the health perspective. I am a medical health officer for the city of Surrey, which is soon to be BC's largest city. And also one that has a remarkable vision to transform itself from motordom to a more walkable, livable place. There will be a walk shop in Surrey tomorrow, and I would recommend that if you can, to take that in. In working with, I work with the Fraser Health Authority, and in working with that, I also get to work on built environments, which is a great passion of mine and what brought me to this conference. You'll be happy to know that I'm going to keep this short so that we have more time to hear from our speakers and to hopefully take a few questions from the audience. In my opinion, I'd rather hear from them than be up on a stage myself anyways. Before I introduce the first of our speakers, though, I do want to just share two ideas from yesterday. First of those is that I was really over the moon to hear Penny Ballum set the stage for this conference with her comments about the importance of health to planning and vice versa, of planning to health. I think the health argument can really help develop a very strong basis of support both for politicians and the public to help make the changes that we all want to make. The second thing that I was really reminded of yesterday was the importance of partnerships and of cross-sectoral collaboration. First of all, in working with the steering committee, which has been an amazing opportunity, and as well with getting to meet so many of you, planners, architects, engineers, researchers, citizen advocacy groups, artists, and others who all share a passion for a common vision, and it's through our collective work, really, that we can effect change. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce our first speaker of the day, who is Dr. William Bird, which I think is a fabulous name for the Strategic Health Advisor for Natural England. He leads the health programs to develop the natural environment as a major health resource. He also chairs the Outdoor Health Forum, works as a clinical director for the Environment and Human Health Unit at the Peninsula Medical School, and has managed to write a number of papers, as well as a book and several reports. And he also works half-time as a GP, which I haven't quite figured out how he manages to fit all that in. So without further ado, Dr. William Bird.
Thanks very much. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Ooh. I'll just walk over here. Thanks very much, and it really is great to be here. It goes right back to when Jim Walker first set up Walk 21, and I remember being inspired by that first conference back in, I think, was it 1999 or 2000? 2000, it was 2000. In that walking had always been the kind of Cinderella, we know that. It's always been on the kind of the back burner for health, the back burner for planning, and suddenly a whole conference is dedicated on it. And since then, thanks to this conference every year, it really has grown. It really has now become the fundamental part of what we are as a society, a walkable neighbourhood. It defines now the place where we live. It is used as a point of reference of how successful we've been. So what I want to do is to expand on that to the health side of it, and to actually not just kind of list through what we've heard, although how important they are, diabetes, obesity, etc. I'll do that as well. But it goes deeper to that. What is the cause of all this obesity and diabetes? Is it just simply we eat too much and we do not enough exercise? Or is there something more underlying? And does walking and the planning of a city unlock that X factor, whatever it is? So, some of you are aware that the United Nations had a major conference in September, and this is really now where things are moving. The non-communicable disease, it now kills more people, particularly young people, particularly the poorer, and in developing and developed nations. So it's now the new mantra. It's become the new AIDS, the new malaria for the World Health Organization and for the United Nations. And people like me, to dealing with this, are pretty useless. I see patients, I see about 2,000 or 3,000 a year, and I see the end product right at the end. I kind of mop up, put sticking plasters over them, but really it's all too late. They've got the diabetes, they've had the heart disease, they're already obese and very hard to lose weight. So I come in right at the end, and all I can do is patch things up and watch them suffer, and watch people suffer as they come to the end stage. And that was the one thing that inspired me back in 1995 to set up the health walks, which we'll briefly mention, is because the diabetic patients were just not getting active. They weren't doing anything. And I'm going to use a horrible word here, but what I was seeing were those people kind of rotting. You felt that they'd lost the ability to fight in their immunity, etc. Their blood supply was poor, and you really saw these people just fading in front of you. And it's fairly horrific when you see an active person slowly deteriorating. And that's what's happening to millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world as I'm speaking now. Okay, so if we wanted to find our perfect city, these are words that we used. Last time I was just getting a kind of few calls. People wanted it beautiful, free, vibrant, exciting, sustainable, balanced, healthy, energetic. But there's one thing that unites all of that together, and it's actually been around for an awful long time, and that's life itself, the very existence of life. So life as in animals, trees, plants, us, you, me, all of us. Life is all of those. So that's a great reference point to start with. If you can introduce life into a city or life into people's lives, then you'll start to get all those things. But these are my patients. So here's Julie. The excitement of her life is on the channel. Probably lots of people, probably lots of your children, my children as well, very happy in that situation. But what's actually happening is that what she's learning, or what she hasn't been stimulated by, is actually the outdoors. It's actually experiencing life, the thrills, the risks of how you actually develop to be a grown-up child and going up into being an adult. All the stimuli which actually make a child thrive and resilient are just not there. Her diet isn't there, she's not active, she's not interacting, she's not being outdoors, she's not understanding the outdoors. And slowly she'll find that when she gets older, she won't have the muscle strength and the bone strength will have already been slightly reduced as she gets going. And that's her role model of Julie's dad. And he's already got diabetes, and he is already got total low self-esteem. He's out of a job, and life is passing him by. For him, life isn't that excitement, all those words we saw out there, beautiful, perhaps not. But there's something missing. Is that as good as it gets? Is that really the top of a civilization that humanity has created? Is this what we want? Or have we got something wrong? And if so, how on earth can we get Julie's dad to transform? You can just tell him to get off his bum, sort himself out, and get out there. But unfortunately, we know that doesn't quite work. There has to be something else that's pushing it along. And then Julie's grandmother, who's had a whole life, last 20, 30 years of no activity, is now, her bones and her muscles are not strong enough to live on her own. And the one thing that keeps a person independent is physical activity. And for an older person and for a child, the amount of time they spend outdoors is directly related to the amount of physical activity they do. Slightly different for adults. But for older people and children, the more outdoors, more activity. Straight line graph. So she has not been outdoors very much. So let's have a look at quickly for children. Here's Ed, in the top left-hand corner. And I've used this a lot, and I keep on saying I'm not going to use this slide ever again. And then people say, but it was such a great slide. And I can't see that I'm going to stop using it because it does make a sense of what's happening. Ed, his great-grandfather down at bottom there, used to have a 9-mile radius to be able to roam around in 1917. Being able to go, 6 miles, be able to fish, go with his friends, do anything he wanted. the great-grandfather's son, Jack, when he was 8, he was able to walk a mile completely free from his house to the woods and do fishing. Jack's daughter, Vicky, when she was 8 in 1979, she was able to go half a mile, and that was just to be able to go down to the swimming pool on her bike. And then we've now got Ed in 2009, 2010, and he can only go 300 metres. 300 metres is the distance that most parents will now allow their child to go. So he's slowly become cocooned into an indoor environment, perhaps outside if he's lucky, to the streets. What he wants to do is go and play the trees, which is just outside his house, but his mum won't let him. His mum was trying to be a good mum. She is a good mum. But by being a good mum and not letting him be affected by strangers, his development is forever changed because he won't have had that outdoor experience, the risks and being outdoors. He won't have had the life experience. That's what children want. They just want that exploration. And by the age of 12, it's too late. 12 is a cut-off point for a lot of these developmental parts of a child. And so many aspects of a child, if they're deprived indoors, actually change if you don't get that experience. They're not as coordinated, not as strong, not as able, and even their immunity, concentration, behaviour, all can be affected. So what we're doing is slowly alienating these children. So a child living there, who had that common, is now over there. We put them into houses, into blocks. Life is being extinguished. Okay, so we're now getting rid of life. There's nothing else there. So what I want to propose is that we look at this in a very different way. The evidence is coming through thick and fast, but actually, to get the real health, to get the life, to get that energy we're looking for in that perfect city, there are 3 things that need to be sorted out. You have to have people who've got friends, community, family, and workplace, people around you who can support you. You have to be in a place that you feel totally unstressed and you enjoy, and it's got lots of activities. And you've got to have some purpose in your life, or purpose of what you're doing each day. Those 3 things independently, all, if they go wrong, have health problems, particularly the loneliness. And if you get that right, you get this well-being. Resilience is, as a child, how much have you kind of stored up as a child of being a resilient child? The more well-being you have, the more healthy behaviour you choose. So it actually feeds on itself as a positive cycle. So the more stable you feel, your healthy behaviour, and that leads to health. But well-being itself also leads to better health. So you've really got the resilience of someone who's going to be healthy. So people, purpose, place, whichever way we want, those are the 3 things. So what happens when it starts to go wrong? And why does it go wrong? So here are now the people bit has been taken away. This lady's in isolation. Double the risk of heart disease, considerably more of a risk of depression, and many other chronic diseases start to creep up for people isolated. Place where people live. Jim Salas will talk later, but absolute overwhelming evidence how important place is. And purpose. The London riots, the one thing that unanimously has come through is that those children and those teenagers and those young adults just couldn't care. They had no care in the world about anything because nobody cares about them. They had no purpose in their life. So if you can deal with those 3 things in your design of creating the great city, then you can sort things out for health, and we'll come on about what's going to happen. If we don't sort them out, you get chronic stress. Chronic stress is a medical term. It is, you get stress hormones, there's a whole change, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, and it's not just that time of talking in front of loads of people like now, or an exam. That's a short-term stress. That's good. That's actually good for you. That kind of keeps you on your toes, and that's important. Chronic stress is a constant wearing down of stress. Living in poverty, living in a neighbourhood like that with no purpose in your life. Julie's dad has got chronic stress. He's not doing anything, But because of that, he's got this stress. He's irritable. He gets angry easily. He drinks too much. And what happens when you've got this chronic stress? Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back. Why have we got chronic stress? Why are those three things so important? Well, if we go back to, and this is a slightly slipped now, but if we go back to 1,000 years, and make it 1 hour, and you go back 100,000 years, that's about 100 hours. All the way from before the weekend, all the way up to 10 hours ago, we were hunter-gatherers. Then we had agriculture 10,000 years ago. And then in those 6 hours to 4 hours ago, we started civilizations, the big, massive civilizations in Egypt, and then Greece. And then 9 minutes ago, industrialization. And then Julie's generation is literally half a minute to a minute ago. So we're expecting humanity as organisms to have changed in a minute when its programming has been going on for several days, 5 days. And just in a minute we said, right, change it all. And it's not going to. We're not that smart. Our bodies are still geared up to the hunter-gatherer. And it will take another days and days before we finally get to the point when we're going to be adapted to the new environment. So we have to be humble. We have to have humility to realize that we've got to not try and go faster and faster in a different place and leave our whole body behind, but we have to fit in to what our body wants. And if we just go back again, hunter-gatherers were grouped together, sociable animals. They had places where stress would have been reduced when there was water, when there were trees, when there was shelter, when there was security. And they'd always have a purpose, because the purpose drove them forward to eat. So the hunter-gatherer would have had all those things sorted out. And for those where we know that they're indigenous populations who really are struggling to cope in modern society, that's been even a quicker change for them. And all those three things have disappeared. So this is what happens when it goes wrong. We get this chronic stress, the resilience has gone, the healthy behavior has gone. Instead, what's the treatment for stress? What happens when you're stressed? It will come in. Who smokes? You have more cigarettes, alcohol. You eat, you sit down, you're too tired to do any activity. You drink and you do everything else you shouldn't be doing. Because when you're stressed, we all put on weight a little bit more. In fact, cortisol, which is one of the steroids that comes out, actually makes you put on weight anyway. But the kind of inactivity, because you're too tired, you want that sugar and fat to hit your dopamine, you want your cigarette to hit the dopamine and get the addiction, and you just want to forget about life. So our unhealthy behavior changes. So when you're chronically stressed, you get unhealthy behavior and you get stress hormones. Now, a bit of biology here. This is a cell. Who knows what a mitochondria is? Yes! We've got some mitochondria fans here, perhaps a bit sad here, but the mitochondria is the energy. It's a Duracell battery. You have the battery in every cell, about 30 of them. Do you know a third of our body weight is mitochondria? It's a bit bizarre because they're in absolutely every cell. But they are very, very efficient. They're in plants as well, because obviously when photosynthesis doesn't work, you have to do something during the night time. So mitochondria work in plants. They're in every animal. The only thing they're not in are very, very small single-celled. So entire life, you carry it. So 5 billion years ago, it all changed, and they drive us forward. They're the energy. So chronic stress, stress hormones, unhealthy behavior. There's the evidence, strong evidence now that causes damage to mitochondria. And when your mitochondria is damaged, the cell dies. When the cell dies, you age. That's how aging takes place. So the more radiation you have and kills lots of cells, then the quicker you age. The more stress you have in your life, the quicker you age. But it's not just that. Mitochondria also lead directly to cancers and cardiovascular and diabetes and dementia. That's the recent evidence on that one. And depression is mostly directed from the chronic stress part. these are the 4 which I started on that slide about the United Nations. So what seems to be happening is infectious diseases are sorted out. We have now got a massive epidemic of those 4 at the bottom there. Obesity obviously fits into them. A lot of this is directed to damage being done in our own bodies and the way we have our lifestyle. So the stress causes all those lifestyle changes and there's a direct damage. And the chronic stress is caused by the top. So I'm dealing with this bit, patching up what I possibly can with expensive drugs and really not managing very well sometimes. The public health, like Helena, is going to be dealing with that part. And then you, dealing with society and how you build it up, are the most important. You, if you're in that area, have influence in there, have more influence than I'll ever have as a doctor. I can talk about this and try and encourage you, but I have no idea how to plan a city. I have no idea how to create communities together and create social. I'm not trained in that. All I can do is measure blood pressures and do diabetes. So the health providers are you. We're more redundant. That's where the answer is to this whole epidemic. Obesity, you've covered some of this already. We know how important it is. We know the diabetes, how important that is, $8 billion, and it can be prevented. If anyone told you that there's actually $8 billion being poured down a drain and there's an 80% chance of putting it right, wouldn't you have thought someone would have thought, come on, well, let's talk to everyone and get this sorted out? But there's a sort of sense of urgency. It's only just slowly coming through now. And we got evidence, some evidence there about obesity and green space, and I'm going to talk a little bit about green space as well. How the more green space you have, the more activity you have. The evidence is not great, it's not perfect, but it's certainly in certain areas we're getting more knowledge about it. And again, Jim Salas will expand far more eloquently than I can on that. And I've just put this one up here. It's a horrible table, but physical inactivity has the effect on virtually every single chronic disease that we have. But if you look at where the money goes into cholesterol, the statins, which only has the effect of heart disease and stroke, and even stroke it's secondary. So we're not really, if we can get this activity side and get people more active as a daily basis, not just at gyms, but in what they're doing every day, we will have an effect on all of those. These others, which are the ones we know about, are much lower down, much, much lower down. And then look at the money. It's a very basic slide here. A QALY is a quality adjusted life year. It's what we use in healthcare to work out how can you add an extra life, a year of life to someone which is of good value. Okay, so not just somebody lying moribund and not able to speak, but someone who can live an active life and be part of the community and family. How much does it cost to get that extra life year? Well, for statin supplements, it's £17,000. Sorry, it's in pounds, times that 1.6. For smoking cessation, it's 9,000. But for physical activity, and you could probably say there's a massive margin of error here, but even if there was a massive margin of error, you're still nowhere near 17,000. And our National Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK put 30,000 as something that's worthwhile doing. So some of these really expensive cancer drugs go right up to £30,000. And you've got physical activity of 440. So why isn't every single doctor prescribing physical activity? Why isn't every single doctor involved with the planning and making sure that we've got a city here that's totally equipped for physical activity in everywhere in the world? But at the moment, there's a big divide. There's a divorce between the medicine and the medics and this kind of area of physical activity. And if you have a park, I did some work for the Royal Parks, and we worked out that Regent's Park, or the Regent's Park as it should be called, contributes 6% of a recommended activity for every person within a 2 kilometre. And that was done on telephone surveys of how do you go in the park, when do you use it, how do you get there. Most people just walk to the park and take up their full activity level. Population is quite big. The Regent's Park is therefore a health resource. And if you took it away, and people didn't go elsewhere, which of course they would do, but if you took it away, it was about £4.1 million to the economy it was providing purely on physical activity, because physical inactivity costs the UK £8 billion. So the park is a health resource, a very neat, narrow little area there, which is probably doing as much good as several doctors working together, probably doing an awful lot better because people are much happier than having to open their mouth and have a stick put down it. And we know that if you have parks, you have children who may actually not put on so much weight. This is up to 6 kilograms for boys for 2 years being followed up, living in the park. And there was this difference in weight of the children who were 2 years on who lived near parks compared to the 2 years on who didn't live near parks. Mental health is the other big one. We saw depression and we saw dementia, not entirely separated, and it costs an awful lot as well, as you can imagine, in Canada. And our chief medical officer said, actually, looking at the evidence, and Sandy said, please mention this study. The study was that actually people who take physical activity compared to people who take antidepressants, there was no difference. No difference at all. People who take psychological treatment and physical activity, no difference. So physical activity is as good as antidepressants and psychological treatment. And that was a report the Department of Health put out in 2004. Do I see my colleagues prescribing physical activity? No. Do I see whole cities changing to say, let's get rid of depression by increasing physical activity in a green space? It's getting there, and this is what we're starting to see move. But that's so powerful. And then we had a inequalities strategy by Professor Michael Marmot, Sir Professor Michael Marmot. And he loved this fact, and he put it into his report, that actually the budget of a new road building, if used differently, could actually create 1,000 new parks of £10 million each. And then you've got the sustainability side of it as well. And those parks can be increasing physical inactivity, get more children to be outside, and we start to get the health benefits. We start to introduce the life. We start to introduce the place part. And then the people bit comes because people congregate in parks and talk and they can take up sport. And then the purpose comes because there's somewhere to walk and there's somewhere to be involved. So the people, purpose, place all start to come together because you've introduced life into the city. We've got other big problem. So we've got our diabetes and obesity and all those problems, but unfortunately we've got a major problem which is underlying it. And that is the inequality of the rich and the poor. So this is a death chart on the side here. So if doctors, we kind of love these things. The more higher it goes, the more you're going to die. Okay, and this is the exposure to green space. This is taken from pretty much the entire UK by an MR medical research unit up in Edinburgh. And what they found was, actually, if you're very rich, the amount of green space doesn't seem to make much difference to how quickly you're going to die. Very slightly, you're going to die a bit earlier if you've got little green space compared to very green. If you're middle income, there's actually quite a big gradient. Not as much as being rich. That's really protective compared to middle income. But if you look at the lower income, then you can see a much steeper gradient. You look at the gap between the highest, see if I can make this work. Oh, that's going to really, between there and up there. So look at that gap, compare it to this gap here between there and up there. And the authors are working out why that little problem of why no green, little green goes the other way. A lot of it's the inner city, very high affluence in the inner cities. But it narrows, it blunts the health inequalities. So the more you actually, if you can kind of get the design, and we know that the people, purpose, place affects the poorer people much more because that's where most of the stress is. If you can aim it at that group of people and design it around those people, then you will have the biggest impact on health. Whereas if you aim it on the richer people, you're going to have some effect, but not as much. So this is the whole design, or whether it's green space or just open space or whatever we do, is actually has to be designed in the most poorest populations if you want to make a difference on health. And here's just an example of our Bakerloo Line, the underground in London. People who know about Wembley Stadium will know this is how you get to Wembley. At Kenton, down to Willesden Junction. At South Kenton, lovely leafy area, the life expectancy of people in that borough are 81 years. The life expectancy just a bit further down is 80 in North Wembley. Then you get into this brown area, which is by definition the area of green space deficiency. I'm not saying that's a cause, I'm just saying that's an association with the kind of neighbourhood we're getting now. Wembley Central 76, Stonebridge Park 73, Harlesden 71. So just in those stops, you've done 10 years less life expectancy. And when it's not all drinking, smoking, being obese, it's this other factor of stress, the environment as well. And the mayor in London has actually said, look, let's try and get the green space, let's try and actually make it and push it for all Londoners, not just the leafy suburbs in Knightsbridge and Chelsea, but let's go to the Newhams where the Olympic Park is about to be built. And one of the big reasons why that was chosen, it's the most deprived area in the entire Britain. And the park will have a central corridor of a really lovely park with fingers going out to be a network for the entire East End. So how do we actually make some things going? Well, I can't talk about what you can do because you can do all the things, or some of you can, of planning, of how you actually make it all work, of people who look at communities and how to build communities and keep them social. I don't understand that, but that's going to be the difference in health. You will have far, far bigger impact. You are the new health providers. We'll be kind of just doing the kind of stuff at the end result. The Natural Health Service, therefore, is what's actually out there. It's the life around the buildings, the places. And let's create this life so cities are not just for people, but they're for everything. And we treat the trees and the grass, and we treat people as well, but we give this whole bit of vibrance and energy. And what you're trying to do is to get more life of natural environment to people, and you're trying to pull people out into the natural environment. You can build a park and say this is a brilliant park, but not include the purpose and the people bit, and nobody goes to it. And you've got this fantastic park which nobody ever uses. And then, of course, it gets taken over by unsavoury groups, and then it's a no-go area, and because there's no surveillance, it's dead. So we have to encourage people to go in. Now, I'm going to talk about a few things I've been doing, some of it with Natural England, some of it with my own work in intelligent health. Just as a quick way, before I do, here was the first time that this was done. The Registrar of Births, Deaths and Marriages said in his report in 1845, this place is a dive, this place is a real sink, this is the East End of London. And he built a park there. And he said, that's where we need the park, because that will save more lives. And that was with Queen Victoria. We're going to try and put 1.3 million trees around hospitals and health centres to understand that connection between the National Health Service and the natural environment. We're trying to get GPs to understand that the area around where they live for their patients should be as important to the health as what happens inside the surgery. So mapping out the parks and the leaves and the trees and everything there so that their patients can have something and they can fight for it if things are going to be taken away. We've got health walks, which I set up originally in my practice, and that's what inspired me to get into this area. It's got much bigger now, but that actually takes people out into the natural environment. Julie's dad would be a prime example of getting him out there, making friends, and then off he goes. It's a national team going down to walkers down at the bottom. And then we've just started doing a little swipe thing for getting children to walk to school. So they swipe along there, it goes onto their website, and that's to get more children out into the environment. It doesn't have to be the natural environment, any environment to get them to walk. And that will hopefully be one of the Olympic legacies when it takes place fully in the summer. we worked with Queen's University, and at Stormont Castle, which is the headquarters of a Belfast Assembly, we got all the staff to go out at lunchtime if they wanted to, and they got points, and the points, by swiping on these little units there, they got points, and the points were given by local business, and it was trying to see if you can get more people out into the environment, starting to walk, starting to explore. So we need to look at perhaps the whole city in a different way. And this is in Germany, and this is looking at an infrared. So the trees stand right out, because they're now the part of life, the important part. And it's the way we see things now, perhaps not just on what we can man-make, but how we see the whole city as one vibrant with life. Because life's good. Thanks very much.